the new missile, Burevestnik missile, and it's difficult to pronounce some of these words. And how when you look at the technology that they've used, because they're talking about it's a new technology, it's a new nuclear technology that can be used in civilian applications, the space program, what they have in that term. And how did you find it? Is there any sort of difference between the two? Because this new one is the cruise missile. The Oreshnik was a ballistic missile, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, is that the case?
Well, the I guess the genesis of both of these weapon systems comes from different starting points. The Oreshnik is a system that's born of the decision by Donald Trump in 2019 to withdraw from the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty. The Russians at that time said that, okay, you withdrew from that, but we're not going to develop new intermediate range missiles. We'll do a self-imposed voluntary moratorium unless you deploy intermediate range missiles into Europe. And unfortunately, we did so. We deployed a launch system, Aegis Ashore Mark 41 type launch system that wasn't equipped with Tomahawks, although it could be, but it was equipped with the SM-6 Typhoon missile. And the Russians went, you violated it, you brought in an INF-capable system. So they began to develop a follow-on system. They had a missile, the RS-26 Rubyezh, which was being developed at the time of the negotiation of the New START treaty. The problem is the range of the Rubyezh, depending on what payload you put on it, could either be an intermediate range missile, because once you test a missile to intermediate range, it becomes an intermediate range missile, or it could be an ICBM, meaning it flies longer distances. And the Russians, in the interest of bringing the New START treaty to fruition, they went ahead and put the Rubyezh on ice in 2017, I believe. And so what happened is, with the special military operation going on, with the threats of the use of ATACMS missiles, the Russians made a decision that they were going to go from research and development to creating an operational system. They developed in very fast order this missile called the Oreshnik. It's a derivative of the RS-26, but it uses all new technology. It's still, the Russians don't talk about it very much, but just based upon some of the intelligence that's put out, it uses a booster stage from the Yars missile, which is an ICBM. It may use a second stage from the Cedar missile, which is an advanced ICBM that hasn't been, I think it's been flight tested once. It uses a reentry vehicle, again, adapted from a modern version of the Yars system that has multiple warheads on it. And then it uses a whole new design warhead, which gives it the name Oreshnik, hazelnut. If you take a look at the hazelnut tree, you see the hanging fruit, and that's what it looks like coming in. The Ukrainians, retrieved parts that are from the Bulava missile, which is the submarine-launched ballistic missile, which means that the Russians went out and picked parts that exist from various missiles and brought them together. This is something they've done in the past. It goes back, the Moscow Institute of Thermal Technology, which is the design bureau for this missile, used to be called the Nadaradze Bureau. This is what they do. The SS-16 missile became the SS-20, which then became the SS-25. They build upon missile systems. But the Oreshnik is a response to the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, and it was designed to be a missile that threatens Europe. Indeed, when it was announced, basically Medvedev, in one of his mean tweets, said, all the cathedrals of Europe, the great cultural centers of Europe, are now at risk of being destroyed by the Oreshnik. That's what Europe has gotten you by going to, by getting involved in the Ukraine conflict. The Burevestnik, I'm sure, has a completely different lineage. First of all, the concept of a nuclear-powered cruise missile is not new. In 1957, the Soviet defense industry put out a requirement for a nuclear-powered cruise missile. And the Russians and the United States have been trying to develop one ever since. We built, I think we call it the Scram, I don't know. But Ours was dirty. When we tried to fly it, it just left a trail of radioactive waste in the air. And we said, this is impractical. It doesn't make any sense. And we stopped doing it. The Russians kept going during the Cold War. Now they put it on ice. Like many projects, when the Cold War ended, the Soviet Union ran out of money and the Russian Federation was broke. So a lot of these projects just sat there on ice. But because George W. Bush withdrew from the anti-ballistic missile treaty in 2002, and because the United States began deploying missile defense systems, first the ground-based interceptor in Fort Greely in Alaska. We claim it's for shooting down North Korean missiles, but it can shoot down Russian missiles too, or at least try to as they come across. And then we put the Aegis Ashore Mark 41 system in Poland and Romania. And then we deployed Aegis-capable ships around the world that are equipped with advanced model SM-3 interceptors, SM-6 interceptors. These are the same ones that we used to shoot down Iranian missiles, or tried to shoot down Iranian missiles when they fired against Israel. And the Russians are saying, so you built a missile defense shield. And we told you not to. So Vladimir Putin in 2018 gave a presentation where he said, because of what you've done, we have no choice but to develop new weapon systems that can defeat any missile defense shield that you put up. And it was a multi-spectral attack, a broad-based approach to addressing the issue of how to overcome missile defense. One was one of the announced systems was the Sarmat, a heavy intercontinental ballistic missile with multiple warheads. The thing about the Sarmat is its range allows it not to overfly the North Pole, which is the standard attack route, where we have all of our early warning radars lined up. That's why we like Greenland, because it gives us early warning. No, it comes in from the south, where there are no early warning. There is no potential missile defense, and it'll just launch, come in, nothing can stop it, take out all the targets. They came up with the Avant-Garde, which is a hypersonic maneuvering reentry vehicle that is equipped today on the SS-19 missile, a silo-based missile, but it's also been put on the SS-27, the Yars, the Sarmat can carry it. And basically, this warhead can't be shot down. It's hypersonic, it flies at speeds that can't be intercepted, it maneuvers, and it has precision strike. They came up with the Poseidon. And I think Putin just made an announcement either today or yesterday about the Poseidon, that they've tested it. Not the nuclear charge, but the concept of the system, and it's devastating. The Poseidon is basically a large torpedo, nuclear torpedo of 100 megaton range that will be launched and will sit off the coast of the United States or any nation that has coastal waterways. And when the time comes, will detonate, sending a gigantic tidal wave in to destroy cities. And then the last system that Putin briefed was the Burevestnik, the nuclear-armed cruise or nuclear-powered cruise missile. The concept here is to have a cruise missile that can fly unlimited range. That means that it's no longer has to go from point A to point B. It can evade air defense, evade missile defense, come in from the south. It can fly around forever. It also can be launched anywhere. So the Russians aren't going to have it sitting on coastal batteries close to the target. It can be stored in a mountainside in Siberia and brought out and fired. It'll hit any target on Earth. And when you look at all of these weapons together, they overwhelm any concept of a missile defense system. Donald Trump's talking about the golden shield, the golden dome. They're going to create this missile defense system. Everything that Putin just put out there will defeat that missile defense system before it even gets started. That was the purpose of it, and that was why the Burevestnik was put in. You can't look at it in isolation. You have to look at it as one weapon of a family of weapons designed to create a broad spectrum approach to overcoming American missile defense.
Is that enough for Europe not to escalate in Ukraine? Do they get the message from Russia?
Europe's not going to escalate in Ukraine. What do you mean? What is Europe going to? I always love it. What's Europe going to do? Give me one thing Europe's going to do in Ukraine. One. 2,000 French foreign legionnaires, they're dead on day one. Literally, they cross the line of departure, they die. Provide fighters? Where? What fighters? They're going to build a fighter factory in Ukraine? How long do you think that will last before it's taken out? There's nothing Europe can do except put more money into this. And the money doesn't buy manpower. The problem with Ukraine right now is a manpower shortage, an acute manpower shortage. Already there's significant numbers of mercenaries in, but there's not enough time. They don't have the luxury of time anymore. You can't take 4 months to train up a mercenary army. Whoever goes in now gets 2 weeks of training, sent to the front line, they die. That's it. So there's nothing Europe can do. It's all talk, all talk, all talk, literally. They can do nothing.
And the key is the money, in my opinion, that resonates with Donald Trump and his administration. That's why he's somehow trying to get a. He doesn't.
He doesn't know
Do
what he
you
wants.
think that he's putting pressure on Europe? I don't see that happening.
Donald Trump lives in a he's written off this conflict. He has said, I mean, it's the only time he admitted defeat. I thought I could have stopped this war, but it turned out to be much more difficult. So he's no longer even trying. He's told Europe, this is your show. You've got this one. You do it. Look, they just did a under the Biden administration, we used to send an armored brigade into Europe to reinforce Europe. Generally, we send it up north, and so it would operate in Poland, the Baltic states, do a bunch of exercises, and then they peel off a couple battalions. They'd go down to Romania and deal with the Balkan states. Then we upped it to 2 brigades. So we have the Northern Brigade, and now we have a Southern Brigade. The United States just announced that they're done. The 3rd Infantry Division just sent a brigade combat team into Romania where they're taking over that mission. And when that mission ends in 6 months, there will not be a replacement unit. It's over. We're done. We're finished. We're not going to war against Russia in Ukraine. That is a done deal. If we wanted to provide Tomahawks as part of a package that was designed for escalation to lead to a decisive conflict with Russia, we'd be sending additional brigades to Europe. We're disengaging from Europe right now. We don't want a war, and we know that Europe's not going to get into a war. We know what NATO can do and what NATO can't do. NATO can talk. That's it. This war will end when Russia wins the war. Tragically, that's the reality. The Russians just put Trump on those. Did you notice how they flipped the narrative? It used to be Trump said, we'll have a meeting with Vladimir Putin when he's ready to give us an acceptable peace plan. The Russians came back and said, yeah, we don't envision a meeting with Donald Trump until the United States is realistic about peace and puts forward a realistic plan. They flipped the script. It was Russia had to provide it. Now the Russians are saying, no, we're happy with what's going on here. We got this under control. You want to change this? You have to come in with an acceptable peace plan. And you know our conditions. That's why Marco Rubio canceled the meeting, because the Russians, they weren't going to budge at all. And Rubio wasn't willing to do what was necessary to get the deal. That is to put pressure on Europe and everything, because Marco Rubio in his heart hates Donald Trump. Everybody needs to understand that. He doesn't like Donald Trump. He despises Donald Trump. He believes in his heart of heart that he could be a better president than Donald Trump. And he has an agenda. His agenda is a war. He's a neocon at heart. Donald Trump should have known better, but Donald Trump took $100 million from Marion Adelson. Rubio was supposed to be vice president, but Trump said, no, I can't stand the man. I can't be around him every day. So instead, he made him Secretary of State, but now he's Secretary of State and National Security Advisor rolled into one. In his last term, Donald Trump admits now that he was stabbed in the back by Mike Pompeo, his Secretary of State, and John Bolton, his National Security Advisor. And he said, I've learned my lesson. Well, he hasn't learned his lesson, because now he's taken Pompeo and Bolton, rolled him into one, and Rubio, who hates him, who's betraying him every step of the way. And Rubio has surrounded himself with, fellow travelers. Scott Bessent, the Secretary of Treasury, who is just a Russophobe at heart, who is the genius behind the sanctioning of Lukoil and Rosneft, which will fail in a heartbeat. Keith Kellogg, who is the Putin whisperer, the Zelensky whisperer, highly decorated by the Ukrainian government for doing what the Ukrainian government wants, and he's the man who whispers to Donald Trump. Rubio is the enemy of peace, and Donald Trump is allowing this to happen.